I actually have a short talk today. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, maybe 25 if I'm long-winded, and then just take a few questions, and we'll wrap up, and we'll head off to dinner and our fun evening event sponsored by Teamwork. What I want to cover today is I did a little bit of a research project, and I looked at a bunch of the recent, lot of self-funded SaaS that has grown unusually fast compared to the rest of the cohort. And so my N is all of the SaaS apps that I have some type of knowledge of. So these are MicroConf attendees who I've had conversations with. These are blog posts. These are people being public with their numbers. These are people in Founder Cafe and Micropreneur Academy. These are people who have written into me personally, startups or the rest of us. So there's thousands of founders, hundreds, if not approaching 1,000 startups and SaaS apps. And so this is the self-funded edition. There's some unfair advantages that you could use if you're funded, but we're not going to obviously talk about those. These unfair advantages, I will never, if I ever start another app from scratch, I will never start one without at least one of these unfair advantages, okay? So the way I came to this is I was thinking about Drip and thinking about over the past year, some things we learned. More importantly, I was thinking, why did Drip grow so much faster than everything else I've ever done? Okay, and Drip's doing well. I mean, for an update, we're doing 7-figure ARR, 9 people, one of whom is part-time, and it's good. Like, it's fun. I'm learning a lot of stuff, and there's 4 of us here from the team. What the thing that got me started thinking is I was looking at Drip and thinking, okay, so I've done this before, right? I had HitTail, I had Wedding Toolbox, I had .NET Invoice. None of these things, CMS Themer, Beach Towels, as Mike just mentioned. I've done all this stuff over these years, this decade, and Drip has just exponentially grown faster. And so I was like, well, there's market conditions. I'm a little more experienced, but I wanted to quantify that a little more. And so I made it a little broader because, me sitting here talking about why Drip outperformed my, 10, 15 entrepreneurial endeavors isn't actually that interesting. So then I went a little broader, and I said, all right, who do I know? What SaaS apps do we know that have done really well? And then started looking at data points and figuring out, why did they grow faster? What was this unfair advantage that these founders had? And so, you might recognize a few SaaS names on this page. A lot of them have grown fast. You might recognize a few apps on this page. There are some WordPress plugins here as well. So some of these are here in this room. And I just kept going through my notes and all the stuff from the past several years. And I came up with 4, only 4, not 5. Competitive advantages that I've seen the people who are on that first slide, who we all know have grown 2, 5, maybe 10x faster than the rest of the cohort, that they have had, okay? And so I'm going to define these, and then we're going to look at the 4 unfair advantages. We'll look at how I believe they are a requirement, at least one, having at least one is a requirement for faster than normal SaaS growth. And when I say faster than normal, I mean 2, 5, or 10x. And then talk about how to improve yours specifically, right? Because this isn't just about my little research project. It's more about how you in the audience, as you're starting yours or as you're growing yours, can take advantage of one or more of these unfair advantages, because the more that you stack on, the better off you're going to be. And I really like the MicroConf tradition. A lot of us will put up a slide of us with our children or something like that. This year I decided to go the extra mile, and I had some kid who doesn't look anything like me. And he has a little joke for you guys.
You're in a concrete room with a saw and a table. What do you do?
I don't know. What do I do?
The answer is you saw the table in half, 2 halves make a hole, climb out the hole.
So that's it, yeah. So that's a 9-year-old version of a bad joke. If he could have told that from here, right? You wonder where he gets it from, right? I think it's genetic. Okay, so let's define this really quickly, and then I'll actually dive into the 4. And again, I'm up here for another 15, 20 minutes. So what is an unfair advantage? I really like this definition. Jason Cohen wrote a blog post several years ago. I think it was like 5, 6 years ago now. Real unfair advantages. And he says, the only real competitive advantage is that which cannot be copied and cannot be bought. So keep those 2 things in mind. If you can copy it or you can buy it, then it's not unfair, okay? So let's take an example. I may be an amazing developer. I might have amazing UX skills. But can that be copied or can that be bought? Like if I raised $1 million and I have to pay someone $200,000 a year, could I find someone else with equally amazing design or UX skills? Probably. Okay, so that doesn't qualify. I'm going to go through a list of the ones that don't qualify later. I was searching as I looked at this stuff and put this list together. I was trying to figure out a way to quantify it, and this quote summarized it. So we'll look at copied and bought as we walk through each of these. So the first one is to be early. And this is actually the most common one that we probably think of, right? It's to be early to a space. A good example of this is Josh Pigford with Barometrics, right? He was early to that space. He was first to that space of one-click SaaS analytics for Stripe. And a bunch of people came after him, but he had that advantage of getting out there and being early. One thing to keep in mind with being early, it is a really good advantage, but it is temporary. You're only early until your competitors flood in, okay? It is only feasible in small or emerging markets. And what I mean by that is we can find maybe a market for a WordPress plugin that does something for pet sitters, manages their scheduling. And you could be early to that market still because it's just really small, right? An emerging market is an example of what Josh did. He got into Stripe was fairly new. He kind of caught the curve up, right? If you were to do something today in VR or in wearables or whatever, like Des was talking about, these are all emerging markets. And even like marketing, like MarTech or marketing technology stuff is kind of new. But by definition, if you're looking at a mature market, you can't be early because the thing is mature, right? Unless you have some type of cool innovation, in which case you're creating kind of a new market segment. It does require you to move quickly, right? Because as soon as you see it, if you see it, someone else sees it as well. And so trying to be early when you are if you're building a fairly complex project and you're doing it on the side is pretty tough because you can't move as fast as the two-person team who raised a little bit of funding and they're doing it full time. Okay, so there's pluses and minuses. And the question that I mulled over is, can being early be copied or can it be bought? Obviously the answer is no. And so this does qualify as an unfair advantage. And here's some examples of SaaS apps that grew very quickly based on their early advantage. You recognize all of these. Okay, we had Josh, like I mentioned, with Barometrics. Balsamiq, Peldy launched, 7, 8 years ago. He was early, may even have been longer than that. He did $500,000 in his first year, which is just a Cinderella story, right? And that's what every example I'm going to give you today is going to be an outlier in a Cinderella story. And that's the point, is we're looking at, well, how did they do it? What were the takeaways? So you guys know, I mean, I'm into blocking and tackling, fundamentals growing. But right now we're talking about what's that 2, 5, 10x advantage, okay? So Peldy launched, and he was early to the, it was like, what is it? It's like mock-ups and building a really easily usable tool to build mock-ups. BidSketch, actually. Some of you may not remember, but Ruben from BidSketch, who's actually been to every MicroConf in Vegas until this year because he has a new baby. Round of applause for Ruben's baby. BidSketch, he was the first proposal software that was SaaS. And so he got in early and caught a nice little, the first one I remember. There may have been one before him, but he caught a nice little wave up there. WooThemes, same thing. AD, who was ADPNR, who was a former MicroConf speaker, was the first premium theme seller, and he rode that up as well. They grew very quickly. And then, of course, prototypical example, right? Basecamp. I mean, they were early in SaaS, and they were the first project management tool that I know that was web-based. So the question then that I have for you that relates back to you is, so where do you stand on this with either your current idea or the ideas that you're mulling over? Because at this point, if I was trying to choose from ideas and one of them was earlier, it's a little risky. It's a little more of a gamble because if you're early, you don't know if that market's going to take off. But where do you stand on a scale of 1 to 10 with the ideas you're evaluating or with the idea that you're currently launching? And let's say 1 is a 1 and maybe Basecamp's earliness is a 10. So put yourself on that scale in terms of reality. Unfair advantage 2, it's who you know. Okay, so this is your network. It's the people you know who are willing to go to great lengths for you. They're willing to endorse you. They're willing to promote your product to their folks. Even if it's casual mentions, they're willing to advise you. They're willing to intro you to people who are willing to do that. So you meet a lot of them here at MicroConf. You meet a lot of them if you have if you live in a tech hub or whatever. But these are really deep relationships. And it's very helpful to know people who your competitors cannot access, because if they can, then it isn't really an advantage, right, if everyone's accessing them. So the question I have, of course, who you know. Can it be copied? Can it be bought? Not really. Definitely can't be bought. Pretty hard to copy someone's network, right? This is a huge advantage. And some examples of startups that launched and grew way faster than the rest of us based on their network was AppSumo. And it's not a SaaS app. Noah Kagan, when he first started, was just making connections. He called me. No one knew his name, right? I mean, he had been at Mint, and was employee 30 at Facebook. But when he started AppSumo, 25% of their first bundle, because it used to be a bundle community, 25% of the first sale went to Micropreneur Academy members. And so he saw micropreneur.com as the referral, and he calls me on the phone. And I don't like the phone at all. So I'm like, who are you, dude? And he's like, hey, I'm this guy. And pretty soon I was his friend. It's like he connects, and the dude knows everybody now. So he grew AppSumo based on his network. If he didn't have a network or the capability to build a network, AppSumo would not have gotten where it is as quickly as it did. The other one, there's a couple, 2 or 3 more. Clarity from Dan Martell, also a former MicroConf speaker. Clarity is a 2-sided marketplace, very hard to do. You got to get entrepreneurs who are very busy to give advice to people who want to pay them for the advice, and you take a cut. Purely based on Dan's his who you know, right? I mean, most of us in this room I could not have grown Clarity the way Dan did because his network is so strong. WP Engine from Jason Cohen, he said in an early blog post, he said, I blogged about WP Engine and I think it's yielded us 2 customers, but what it did yield was instant investment. I was able to raise money at the snap of a finger. I was able to find co-founders. I was able to hire people, made a lot of the stuff that he needed to grow WP Engine much, much easier because of who he knew. Unfair advantage. And the last one is an honorable mention. CartHook, actually, they're not at the level of these others yet, but Jordan Gal is the co-founder, and I can tell it in him. He knows a lot of people. They're in the e-commerce space. Okay, so they are cart abandonment emails for e-commerce, and I think that in the next couple of years we're going to see. I see their revenue right now. I am a tiny little angel investor in their company, and I'm seeing the revenue numbers, and I'm seeing them go up, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's because of who he knows. I don't think I could grow CartHook as fast as they are because I don't know the people in his market. Okay, so that's unfair advantage number 2. The question is, where do you stand on who you know in terms of your market and people who can actually get you some, who will promote, who will refer, on a scale of 1 to 10, where maybe 10 is Jason Cohen, perhaps Noah Kagan. All right, so we're halfway done, and I like to have intermissions. And as a follow-up, he was dressed up for a different occasion. I didn't have him dress up and get in front of the thing. He was going to a recital. All right, let's see this one.
You're in a concrete room with a table and a mirror. How do you get out?
I don't know. How do I get out?
You look into the mirror. You see what you saw. You grab the saw. You saw the table in half. 2 halves make a hole. You climb out the hole. This guy's got swagger.
I need to get him a new joke book or something. All right, so the third advantage is, so we talked about being early, talked about who you know, your network. The third advantage is who knows you. Okay, so this is your audience, right? Whether it's, podcast list, listenership, blog audience, email list, or an existing customer base. Having an existing customer base, I would say, is a heck of a lot valuable than just having an audience who's never bought from you. And this can be a difficult transition, but who knows you is a big deal. These are people who know, like, and trust you, and it is very, very hard to copy or buy an audience that actually knows, likes, and trusts you. I'll say it's virtually impossible. So good examples of startups that have, there's a lot of these. These are actually easy to come up with. So Noah Kagan comes back on the scene here. SumoMe, which is a SaaS app. If Noah or pretty much most of us in here tried to launch SumoMe, we would have grown at about a tenth, if not less, of the rate that he did if he had tried to launch it before AppSumo, right? So he launches AppSumo, he gets a list of 700-something thousand people. He launches SumoMe, it's like, how hard, he built the foundation to be able to grow this. Edgar from Laura Roeder is a recent Cinderella story. She grew to 100,000 in MRR within literally a handful of months. But she has 7, 8, 9 years of history and of a customer list of people who she was selling information and coaching and consulting and all that stuff about how to do social media. And Edgar is a social media platform. So it was a perfect fit for her. And she had a whole training company with 7, 8 contractors and such. And she just turned that right into a SaaS app. I mean, who goes to 100 grand MRR in a handful of months from launch? Very, very unique. And it was about who knew her, right? It was about her audience or her customers. Kissmetrics, I'd venture to say that after Heaton and Neil had done Crazy Egg, they had a nice customer base of a bunch of marketers. I was actually one of them. I had never heard of them before Crazy Egg, and then they launched it, and it was like, man, these guys built a really good product. This was innovative. So then when you hear that the next thing they're doing is Kissmetrics, it's like, oh, well, of course I'm going to try that out, right? So who knew them? They already had the customer base. LeadFuse, another honorable mention in the house, Justin McGill. Some folks may not know they're a productized service to do outbound cold email for SaaS, so it's B2B outreach. And then they now have a SaaS component, okay? So their SaaS app is growing faster than usual, and it's because they already have the reach into that market because they've been doing this productized service for the last 18 months or 2 years. And then I would say Drip counts as that. Like one of the reasons that Drip has grown as fast as it does is because I have folks who follow what I do, and I'm able to talk about it. So the question I have for you, again, is where do you stand on this in terms of the size of your audience or the size of a customer base in terms of 1 to 10, and 10 might be a Noah Kagan, someone with a big list of 700,000 people. And lastly, unfair advantage number 4. I started with like 7 or 8 unfair advantages, and I narrowed it to 4 as I went through it. 4 is having growth expertise, because I've seen people with almost no list, almost no network, and not being early, still be able to grow stuff. And how do you explain that? These are people like a Noah Kagan or a Neil Patel, where they have just a Sean Ellis, who have exceptional growth experience. So they know tactics, they know exactly what to do, they know the strategy to find new tactics when the old ones don't work anymore, because they work for, 6 to 12 months, and then you got to find new ones. And they have experience doing it. So they haven't just read about stuff, but they've actually done it probably for another company, maybe as a contractor. They actually have this expertise of dove deep into it. And this expertise, of course, can't be copied and can't be bought. And I want to call out here, I've given 4, those are the 4 unfair advantages. If the term growth expertise or growth makes you want to vomit, then don't go after that one. Like, you don't have to have all 4 of these. The more you have, the faster you will grow. But if that's not your thing, that's not your thing. If you're more about building audiences, then go after the who you know. If you're more about building networks, I am the opposite. I'm terrible at networking. You can go after that. And so examples of startups that have grown based almost purely on this is, you have Sean Ellis with Qualaroo, awesome growth marketer. We have Buffer. Leo and Joel grew it. They really didn't have an audience. They really didn't have a network when they started. They weren't early to the tools market. It was social media, right? But they worked the growth angles, and they knew how to do it. And then Crazy Egg. So that was the precursor before Heaton and Neil had the customer base, before they had the marketing expertise, the audience. They were able to grow Crazy Egg purely based on more growth hacking stuff. All right, so I'll leave you just a couple more slides. Where do you stand in terms of your growth expertise on a scale of maybe 1 to 10, where 10 is Sean Ellis? Okay. So I did look at things that I thought were unfair advantages at first, and then the further I dug in, it turns out they were not. So I mentioned one of these earlier, like great design, great UX, kind of table stakes. If you're going to try to grow this fast, like these companies we've looked at, you really need some decent design, good UX, but since it can be copied or bought, it's not actually that unfair, okay? If you have technical chops, design skills, that kind of stuff, that's great. That's maybe an advantage over someone who doesn't, but it's not an unfair advantage. It is not such a high correlation to being able to grow quickly. Being able to raise money, having funding, a lot of people can do that. Again, maybe a little bit of an advantage, not an unfair one. Having an uncopyable idea was an interesting one. I looked at, there are startups that grew really quick, like Google, because they had the algorithm, Apple in the early days, because Steve Wozniak was a genius and no one else could build that computer. There were a couple other I looked at. Problem is, I've never, ever seen this in any self-funded SaaS. No one has ever had an uncopyable idea, so I removed it from the list, so that's why I'm saying it here. If someone can think of an example later, please tell me, or if someone comes up with an uncopyable idea, I want to be your co-founder. No, I'm just kidding. Derek looks at me with shooting daggers at me. But I will invest in you. Okay, domain expertise. This was one where I was thinking, boy, I was teetering on this for a while. But having domain expertise, so you're building software for psychologists or software for doctors, just having that expertise, it isn't enough. You still would need either the network or the who you know or the gross expertise, right? So just being a domain expert and being able to build software, not enough. Passion, interest, focus, par for the course, right? Table stakes. So these are the 4. And what I noticed the more I dug in and thought about these is that these 3 on the bottom are the only ones you can take with you from idea to idea. Most people in this room, I would venture to say, are going to start more than one company in your life. And the first one is cool, and it's a really good advantage. But so I've never been early, ever, with any idea I've had, and it's hard to do. And number 2, once you're early, when you go to start the next one, it's pretty hard to be early again, right? So I'm not saying that the bottom 3 are more valuable, but they are more permanent. You know, the more you build that audience and the network and your growth expertise, like, you can kind of level up using the stair-step approach if you decide to do this. I've talked about this a lot. I won't rehash it here, but basically, you know, step 1 is it's looking at starting a small idea that basically has a single sales channel and a single purchase price, and then repeating that until you can buy your time out. And then step 3 is doing moving on to subscription stuff. So not jumping straight into SaaS. Interesting thing is with the stair-step approach, you kind of build at least a few of the unfair advantages along the way. You're probably going to build a network because you're probably going to come to MicroConf or another conference like it. You're probably going to build an audience because you're going to build a customer base as you stair-step up. And you're probably going to build a little bit of growth experience or expertise. So it is an interesting way that those 2 models fit together. So as I came back to the original slide of kind of like why has Drip grown so much faster than the other stuff that I've done, I looked at I kind of tried to, on a scale of 1 to 10, I rated myself. And to be honest, like with .NET Invoice and all those other smaller ideas, I was like a 1 and a 2 all during that time, just trying to sort my way out. My growth expertise was, you know, a 2 and then a 3 and then a 4. The ones that are interesting are HitTail, which was right before Drip, right? This is a SaaS app that I bought. I grew it to, 300,000 ARR. It flopped around a little bit as I started Drip, and then I exited last year and sold it. And when I acquired HitTail in 2011, I rated myself. So in terms of be early on a scale of 1 to 10, I was a 1 because it was an SEO tool, and it was 2011 and SEO. There were a bunch of tools. Who I knew in terms of my network in 2011, on a scale of 1 to Jason Cohen, I was about a 4. And who knows me in terms of my audience on a scale of 1 to Noah Kagan, I'd say I was about a 5, and growth expertise probably about a 5. I was still figuring myself out. And then Drip's unfair advantages, by the time I got here, were pretty different. Still being early, like it's email marketing, like it's been around for 15 years, so definitely not early to that. Who I knew had grown from, what did I have, a 4? Yeah, 4 to a 7. Who knows me? I'd say my audience has grown, and then my growth expertise. So when I looked at it really from a purely numerical standpoint, it actually played out with me. So what I want to leave you with is, you're here at MicroConf. You've heard there's these 4 unfair advantages. Which of the advantages do you want to increase today, tomorrow, over the next week? Because whether you're in an idea already and you can't suddenly be early or you can't suddenly have a network in it, we are all going to be starting more ideas as we go along. And so which of them do you want to increase? That's it.
Questions for Rob?
Those are my slides.
What was that?
My slides.
Oh, yes. You can get his slides there. What's that?
That was it.
Questions?
Great presentation, Rob. And we've known each other for a bit. Maybe not as long as some other people, but I really enjoy seeing your stuff and seeing the growth of Drip right now. So you've kind of broken it down to those unfair advantages, but can you maybe give some tips or hints on how you can accelerate going from 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, 10? Can you maybe provide some tips on what you would recommend, for example? How can we go a little bit faster from 1 to 10?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying how do you get your score from 1 to 10 faster? How do you? You're asking me how to hack the hack, like growth hack the growth hack? Is meta and it's exponential. Well, which one of the 4? Do you want to get to 10 on be early, who you know, who knows you, or? Yeah, being early is kind of a luck shot, and since I'm not good at it, I would be bad advice. Which one? Building the audience, building the network? You're a networking guy, aren't you? See, I think you got to look. Here's what I would say. Look at these 4 things and think, like, who am I? Like, know yourself, right? Personally know, probably never going to be early. I'm just not that innovative or creative. I'm not a right brain thinker. So the thought that I'm going to catch some wave and like be out ahead of other people, I'd be kidding myself. So I know that about myself. So I'm not going to be early. Who I know, I'm actually a pretty shitty networker. It's just not a natural thing that comes to me. I like meeting people, I like talking, but I don't do the thing where I keep in touch. I don't know. There's like this black magic people do that makes you feel like, yeah, I can't do it. So I happen to have a decent network just purely because I've been around for 10 years and because I'm up on stage and talking about stuff all the time. But I really think that for me, it's the audience and the growth expertise, because the growth expertise is such a left brain thing. Okay? So I think that the lesson for you is like, which of the four resonates with you, and pick one to start with. That's what I would say.
So I know you said you won't bet on being early, but just curious to know right now, what do you think, what industries or what trends are sort of catching up? Just take your best shot.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm not, okay, so I mean, there's a lot of opportunity in marketing SaaS tools, right? There's a lot of, there's just a lot of room there, and there's always people willing to spend money. The other things are wearables, virtual reality, the drone quadcopters, Internet of Things. Those are four off the top of my head. I think there's one other that I'm missing, but those are all trends. But that's the problem, is I look at it and I say, I don't know how to build a SaaS up on those, so I just throw in the towel. But if that gives you an idea, I hope it helps.
Hi, Rob. Curious why you think domain expertise and technical expertise can be bought or copied, but not growth expertise. What's unique about that?
Good question. So technical expertise, someone like a really good programmer, basically, that can be bought or copied because developer, I mean, that's not a terribly difficult one. Domain expertise might be more of a challenge. Let's say we're going into the legal field, right? It's like you would almost maybe have to have enough money to basically hire a lawyer to be, or give them shares or whatever to do it. And that would be expensive. I guess growth expertise could potentially, it's not going to be copied, right? Buying growth expertise from someone who really, really knows what they're doing, like let's say Neil Patel, Noah Kagan, Sean Ellis, like the guys who are the best, or even the guys and gals who are decent at it, they don't tend to want to work for other people. They are actually very hard to hire. There are a couple of exceptions. I could name them, but there are a couple. But I think in general, like really good developers, they do in general tend to take salaried gigs. And hiring a domain expertise, a psychologist, a marketing expert or whatever, like you can tend to get them under control. But growth experts tend to not be that employable because they can run their own show. So.
My question is, if you excel maybe in one area, so for example, I have the podcast for programmers, so if I wanted to do a SaaS for programmers, I would probably bank on who knows me, and then somewhat less on who I know.
Yep.
Should I double down on who knows me, or should I try and compensate for some of the other areas?
That's good. So first of all, with the who knows me, your audience basically, you do have to be careful with that. If you've never sold anything to them, if the first thing you're trying to get them to buy from you is software, it's going to be very, very hard. It's going to be an uphill battle. So if you look at a lot of the folks, like, you look at Laura with Edgar, like she had already sold him stuff. If you look at me when Derek and I launched Drip, it's like people have already purchased a book and a conference and there's this other stuff. So that'd be my first piece of advice, is trying to go directly from an audience to a software product is a bit of a hurdle, so I might try some interstitials there. I think you're doing great. Chuck runs a 5 or 6 podcasts for programmers, including like Ruby Rogues and other stuff, so he has a podcast network. I think you're doing great on building the audience. I would, to be honest, go a little bit after, just knowing your specific case, I would go after a little bit of the who you know. Because I don't know how I would 5x your growth of your audience, but I do think that you could probably 5x your who you know because so many people know you. So I would compensate a little there.
One more?
Maybe one more, yeah.
One more question?
So based on the other companies that you had listed, would you basically say that all of those earlier companies that to some degree floundered or didn't really blow up, that those were pretty much necessary prerequisites for you to incrementally get to the point where you were able to make Drip what it is?
I see. So you're asking, like, for my particular experience, like, did each of those, were they necessary in order for me to grow Drip as fast? I don't think that all those companies were. I mean, some of them, I owned like 5 or 6 different small apps at one point just to cobble together 10 grand a month so that I could quit my job. So like owning a beach towel e-commerce website and an ebook about bonsai trees and an invoicing software written in .NET, and, right? And it's like, now I didn't need all of those. I learned the most from there were a few of them that I learned the most from. I've done a whole other talk about that, of the early things that I learned jack shit from and the early things that I really learned a lot from. So there was a mix. I don't think it needs to take you 9 years to get here at all anymore. You know, it just took me that long because I'm not that smart.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, guys.
So I think you have some T-shirts and stuff over here to give away, and
Yes.
there's also some from Les Films.
Yep, we're going to wrap up the day. So me and my homies at Drip brought some stuff, T-shirts in our luggage and stuff, and we have these epic. They have a tie on them with a little, shirt printed, so or a pocket printed, and those are free to any Drip customer or current trial user, or if you want to become a trial user in the next week or so. Wink, wink. Yeah, that was my growth expertise coming out. Boom. But they're over here. And there's also a big stack of Les Films shirts. So you can look through those and take them at your leisure.
There's also some stickers over there. And don't forget about Heaton and Stelli's office hours in the next room over here. That's kind of immediately. I think Stelli is still sitting over here, but you could drag him by the ear, I'm sure. And then don't forget about the evening event tonight. I think that's in the Moon Room, which is one floor up from where it was last night. So they're the same basic kind of idea as last night. What was that? We did level up.
Didn't think we could get any
bit.
higher, but we're going to get higher tonight.